Hi everybody, and welcome to the Shoemaker workshop. Recently we learned something very profound and important about what actually happened in the Garden of Eden in the very beginning when the serpent tricked and deceived Chava. We learned that the essence of his tricking, the essence of his seducing her, was convincing her that she didn't need any longer to see Hashem face to face, eye to eye, where everything was super clear, but rather she needed to choose to go down and to descend and become, in a sense, physical, and to struggle and to ask all kinds of questions and to go back and forth and to debate about the essence of truth and to try to discover spiritual truth through one's intellect. That's what we really learned last week. So if you don't know about that, you need to go back and learn that class. That's called Seed of the Serpent, and it's also on our YouTube channel. Now, today we want to explore the next step in this process, which is, why is it so bad? Well, fundamentally, it's so bad to fall into that trap of the serpent because it weakens our faith. It weakens our Emunah. So we're going to look at this through the lens of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. And Rebbe Nachman of Breslov taught very seriously against this concept of internal debates and questions in our mind that really go nowhere. But it's a seduction in our mind that we think that they're important. We think that they are real. So we're calling this pseudo-questions. Pseudo-questions in our own mind that really weaken Emunah. And once we understand this, we're going to realize why Rebbe Nachman was so much against this kind of philosophical inquiry. Because what it really is, when we go into it, when we go into philosophical inquiry, what are we really doing? We're going back to the garden and we're eating again from the fruit of the tree that Hashem said don't eat from. And we're once again accepting upon ourselves the advice of the snake. So we want to avoid that as much as we can. So we're going to approach this from one source only, which is Sichot HaRan, Torah number 32, which is Lamed Bet, which is the word lev, heart. So we want to have a heart and not have a heart of stone. We want to have a heart of flesh, not a heart of stone. So Sichot HaRan, these are the teachings of Rebbe Nachman, number 32. So, and I'm not going to go through the whole piece because it's a fairly lengthy Torah, but I am going to be cutting and pasting different bits and pieces of it, actually rearranging parts of it as well in order to create the story flow that I want to create. What is our mission? Rebbe Nachman says, "Tzarich lechazek et atzmo be'emunah." We have to strengthen ourselves in emunah, in faith. That is our mission. Our mission down here on this planet is to strengthen our emunah. And not get involved in chakirot. Now this word, what does it mean? Chakirot literally means investigations, inquiries, questioning, research. It doesn't mean it on a physical level. Like Rebbe Nachman is not coming out against, for example, doing scientific research. He is, in a sense, against doing scientific research if you believe in scientism. If you believe that all there is science and there's nothing spiritual in the world or in the upper worlds at all, that's clearly something that he's against. We talked about it last week. But he's not really talking about that. He's talking about internal questions and even external questions that we articulate when we're trying to figure out things from our own intellect. Things that are really spiritual in nature. And we're going to find out that there are traps that we can fall into if we're not very, very careful about this. So in a sense, when Rebbe Nachman uses the word chakirot, he's echoing the exact same thing we learned last week when we learned that what did the serpent seduce Chava about? He seduced her into believing that she needed to get involved in these kinds of questions and answers, back and forth, pros and cons, yesh and ayin. This is what Rebbe Nachman is just simply calling chakirot. So he says to us, we need to strengthen our faith without getting involved in chakirot at all. V'livli la'ayin kalal b'sfarim shel mechakrim, and not get involved in the books of these people. So who are these people? Well, they're basically philosophers, and they can also be Jewish philosophers as well as non-Jewish philosophers. It makes no difference. Because there can be, and Rebbe Nachman points this out in other places, not here, we're not going to see this tonight in source, but he does point it out in other places. It makes no difference. If even a Jewish rabbi, gets involved in all this kind of chakirot, Rebbe Nachman says stay away from it, because he's basically himself, he's fallen into the trap. And we have to be very, very careful. So don't just believe, oh, this is written by some great rabbi, therefore it's okay. You need to be discerning. Rak l'ha'amin, you have to believe. Ha'amin means to believe, but it means also to have faith. You have to have Emunah. B'Hashem, in Hashem Yiparach, Be'emunah levad, just through Emunah, Bli shum chakirot kalal, without any kind of these questions that we can get ourselves involved in. Now we're going to find out what are these questions as we unravel the teaching. Well, sometimes, of course, you need to ask questions. You're not supposed to just be an idiot. You're supposed to ask and tell any questions. You're supposed to learn. You're supposed to develop your seichel. So you are supposed to ask questions. The question is, what kind of questions is a valid question? What kind of questions are not valid questions? So we need to understand. So that is our mission. Strengthen Emunah and stay away from chakirot. Now, point number 2. You might think that, I don't do this kind of stuff. I don't get involved in chakirot. I'm a pretty simple guy. Or maybe you think that, I'm only 8 years old. I don't have that sophistication yet. So it doesn't really relate to me. Well, let's see what Rebbe Nachman says. He basically says everybody is included in this problem. And we have to solve it, because if we weren't included in the problem, we would be in Gan Eden. Ve'af al pi she'nid be'elanu she'amon ha'am heim rechokim me'chakirot. It may seem to us that, most people are not involved in this stuff. Most people are far away from being sophisticated philosophically and so on. Ve'enam mechakrim klal, and they don't do all this investigation, philosophical inquiry and so on. Even so, be'emet, the truth is, kulam hem me'orevim ba'chakirot. The truth is that everybody is involved in it. Everybody's mixed up in it. So we may be deluded. You see, that's his point. We may be deluded in thinking that I'm immune, I'm fine, but no, we're not fine. We're all involved in it. We all got to be careful. We all have it. We all do this. Even kids, even minors, people under the age, boys under the age of 13, girls under the age of 12, they also do it. They also come to this, having these thoughts of machshavim, chakirot, or bilbulim, and also like having mental confusion, which we're going to get to also in this class later on. So number 1, we learned that we all have a mission to strengthen our emunah and not get involved in chakirot. Number 2, we learned that everybody is involved in this, so we better be careful. Number 3, the third point is the power of emunah. We need to understand how powerful emunah is. If we don't realize how powerful emunah is, then maybe we won't be so desirous of achieving it. If we don't value something, like say, for example, let's say you didn't know that gold was so valuable, in the eyes of the world, or you didn't know that diamonds or pearls or rubies or emeralds were so valuable. When you found the stuff on the ground and you said, oh, that's nice, and you just threw it away. You didn't realize the value. But once you realize the value, you don't want to throw it away. You want to go after it. You want to seek after it. Well, that's like emunah. If we don't realize how valuable it is, we're probably not going to be so inclined to go after it. But once we realize what it can do for us, then we're going to be more inclined to chase after it. So number 1, the number 1 power of emunah is as follows. This is what he says. Let's see what he says. Ki emunah hu davar chazak ma'od. He says that emunah is something that's very strong, very powerful. Chazak ma'od. It's not something weak. It has tremendous power and tremendous strength associated with it. Strength, we want to be strong. We don't want to be weak. Some people think just the opposite. Some people delude themselves into thinking that, if you have emunah, that you're like a weak person. No. If you have emunah, you're a strong person, not a weak person. And so when somebody walks in emunah levad, only in emunah, bli chakirot, without getting involved in all these philosophical questions, v'chochmot, and he also calls this chokhmah. And you might think chokhmah is a good thing. I thought chokhmah was one of the holy spheres. Well, it is. But remember, there's also chokhmah on the side of the Sitra Achra. So when Rebbe Nachman uses the phrase here, chokhmot, wisdoms, he means secular wisdoms, philosophical wisdoms, on the opposite side. Azai zoche lavo lebichinat ratzon. This is an amazing concept. You need to underline that in your notes. He says, when we go in emunah only, and we walk in emunah only, and we strengthen emunah only, and we don't get involved in all this secular nonsense, he says, what happens? He says, we merit straight to ratzon. He said, what's that? Well, ratzon is will, like W-I-L-L with a capital W. Will, one's will That's higher than Chokhmah and higher than Bina. Ratzon is Keter. If you think about the tree of the 10 Sefirot, Keter is the absolute highest sphere of all. And he's telling us here, that's where your Ratzon is. It's above all of your thoughts. It's above your brain in a sense. It's way up above you. You don't even know really where things are coming from when they're coming from your will. It's so hidden and so deep. And what Rebbe Nachman is teaching here is that when we go in Emunah, we can jump straight up to the level of Keter, and we can merit Keter without going step by step by step by step by step. That's the power of Emunah, is this tremendous ascent that it enables. Let's go back to our notes. Shehu lamala afilu me chokhmah. He tells here that Ratzon is even above Chokhmah. Well, there's only one sphere above Chokhmah, and that's Keter. So the question is, where is his Emunah that he's talking about? Which we'll get to in a bit. Dahainu b'hishtokakut nimratz. What does that mean? It means that somebody has this awesome high-level yearning for Hashem. Ma'od, like a lot. Whoa, all he can think of all day long, 24/7, is Hashem. And he just loves Hashem. He just wants to yearn. Devekus, all he's interested in is being close to Hashem. How much so? Ad shelo yeda mala so klau migoro ha'hishtokakut. He doesn't even know what to do. He's going, I don't know what to do. I'm so... All I can think of is just to be close to Hashem. All I want to do is yearn to love Hashem and get close to Hashem. What do I do? That kind of a feeling, if you've ever experienced it, is emanating from Ratzon. And it's very, very lofty, and it's above your Chokhmah, and it's above your Bina. It's above, Chokhmah, Bina, Dat. It's above that. So that's why it says that you don't even know what to do. He says, what did he say? Ad shelo yeda. Because where is Yediyah? Das is below that, right? Das is below Keter. So he says, there's not even Das, because that's that down here. You're way up there. There's not even knowledge. You're completely in this world, this transcendent world of pure yearning. Will, Ratzon. So number one, that's what Emunah can do for you. It can elevate you to that level. Number two, what can Emunah do for you? Just the opposite. It can ground you down here below. It's like Yaakov's ladder, right? Yaakov's ladder was down on the ground and it was up in Shemayim. That's like Emunah. It's down on the ground and it's also up in Shemayim. So he just described the up in Shemayim. Now he's going to describe the grounding down below. Ki kashiyesh lo Emunah. When somebody has Emunah, afilu kashibayim alav yisurim chas v'shalom. Even when all these troubles and afflictions and sorrows and sufferings come upon the person, God forbid, he's able to give himself comfort. And he can give himself like new vitality. Why? Because he understands what's going on. He knows that it's from Hashem. He knows that it's either, let's go on, he knows that he has knowledge, he has awareness that all that suffering has purpose. The suffering has purpose because it's for his good, or directly for his good, to elevate him to higher new levels, to cleanse him, and this is what it is, atonement, kapara. So when somebody has Emunah, he realizes that. He doesn't just criticize everything that happens. We've talked about this numerous times in many classes already, many shiurim. Not criticizing situations, not criticizing what happens to us, not criticizing what people do to us, because it's all orchestrated by Hashem, right? That's the very essence of Emunah. And he's saying when you have that, then the things that happen to you that seem adverse, that seem crooked, that don't seem good, you realize they must be good. So what is Emunah doing for you? It's grounding you. It's giving you stability. You're in a storm, but you're not wavering. You're standing firm. That's actually another meaning of the word Emunah, steadfastness. So on the one hand, Emunah is able to launch you into the stars, but without losing the grounding, which is an awesome power. What things can do that? What things can hold you grounded in the middle of a storm and yet at the same time propel you up into the clouds, up into the sky? Now that's the power of Emunah. So on the one hand, Emunah is actually rooted in Malchut, way down below, the lowest of the 10 Sefirot. And yet it can also, at the exact same time, propel it directly up to the highest sphere, which is Keter. Because they're both in the middle chain anyway, right? They're both in the middle column. So this is an awesome power of Emunah. And on the one end, it's the lowest sphere. It's associated with the lowest sphere, which is Bitachon, right? Which is being nothing and giving over your will to Hashem. And therefore what? All the way straight up to Keter, which is now receiving, in a sense, Hashem's will directly into your mind. It's an awesome thing. So if we think about this during the day, then maybe we'll want to achieve Emunah. We'll be more interested in realizing its awesome power. And we won't want to just treat it, lightly, chas v'shalom. All right, so this is what Rebbe Nachman says is our mission, to strengthen Emunah. Now we've just learned two different opposite poles of how powerful Emunah is. And everybody can fall into the trap, and everybody does fall into the trap of getting involved in chakirot, right? Questions, answers, debates, philosophical inquiries. And that's the seed of the serpent. That's the Zoma. You want to know what the Zoma is? This Zoma, Zuma, people pronounce it differently. But it says that when we stood at Har Sinai, when Klal Yisrael stood at Har Sinai, we were purified of the Zoma. What does that mean? Like, is this kind of black poison going through our blood? No, it means, what is the Zoma? We accepted the advice of the snake. What advice? Get involved in all this stuff. And when we stood at Har Sinai, what did we say? We said, go away. Go away, you Satan. We're not going to listen to your advice anymore. We want to see Hashem eye to eye. You see that? That's when the Zoma left us. When we finally said we're not interested in all that debating and all that philosophical inquiry. We're just going to go straight to Hashem. Because they were grounded in Emunah. That's what it means when it says that the Zoma left us. We were no longer filled with all this internal pollution. It's not physical. Now we're going to go through 5 kinds of what I'm calling pseudo-questions that can trick us. 5 aspects of the seduction of the snake that, if we're not careful, can lead us down this path of chakirot, which prevents us from developing Emunah. The first one is what I call spiritual sabotage. It's spiritual sabotage from the yetzer hara. Let's see how Rebbe Nachman phrases it. Ach yesh chakran shehu betoch lev bnei adam. There is a philosophical inquirer that's right in a heart of all of us, of every person. Now, who is this chakran? Who or what is this philosophical inquirer? Who is this researcher? Who is this thing, this being? Who is it? Dahainu habal davar. What is meant by the term bal davar? Well, in Hasidic literature, bal davar means the Satan, the serpent, the yetzer hara. That's what it means. So he's telling us that every single one of us has within our hearts the yetzer hara, an aspect of the Satan himself, who is the ultimate chakran. He's the ultimate philosophical inquirer, because that's where it all comes from. Because he told and he seduced Hava to do just that. So he's the father of all philosophical inquiries. Now, you can't just go out and tell people this. If they're not willing to listen to this, you got to be very careful what you say this to, because people are going to think you're a nut job, number one. And number two, they're not going to understand what you're saying, because they're going to think you're saying something else that you're not saying. And number three, some people, many Jews, for example, some Orthodox Jews, made their living getting PhDs in philosophy. So you have to be careful. Have some seichel and understand who you're talking to. It's more important to do this for yourself than it is to try to tell other people about it. Let people discover these things on their own. Main thing is to get people connected to Rebbe Nachman. They'll eventually see these kind of things. Probably the first time they're going to read it, they're going to think, huh? And then the second time they're going to say, Maybe the third time they're going to say, really? And then the fourth time they're going to say, I got to look at this. And then maybe the fifth time they're going to say, oh, wow. It takes time. So you can't hit people over the head with a sledgehammer. But the point is, you guys have listened to me long enough so I can be blunt with you. And the point is that we all have this Baal Davar within our heart, and the Baal Davar is the Chakran. He is that ultimate person who is the father of all Chakirot. All right, now let's go on. Shehu Machnis Chakirot Belev Hadam. He's the one that sticks or injects into into every single person, into the heart, all this chakirot. What is Rebbe Nachman talking about? He's just reiterating the explanation of what happened in the garden. I think now you can see it. Once you realize what happened in the garden, and again, go back and listen to that. Make sure you understand that lesson from last week, because it's very, very fundamental to understanding who we are and what is our job, what is our mission. But this is exactly what Rebbe Nachman is talking about. That the Baal Davar, he injects. What is injecting? That's the advice. That's the zera. It's just different ways of saying it. That's the zoma. And it's in our blood. It's not blood physically speaking. It's in our soul. That's what he's saying. He's saying the exact same thing we learned last week, but just in different language. Utsrichim lahachnio ulgarsho. And we have a job to do. What is our job? To subdue him and to drive him out. That's our job. That's our job. Our job isn't to, make a lot of money. I mean, unless, some great tzaddik says you have to make a lot of money because you have to give a lot of money to charity. Okay, then that's part of your job. But your main job is not to make a lot of money. Your main job is to drive out the Satan out of your own heart. That's all of our jobs. Ulgaresh mi libo, and to drive out of one's heart, kol hachakirot, all these philosophical inquiries, ulchazek et atzmo be'emunah, and to strengthen himself in Emunah. You see how they're opposites? That's what he's trying to tell us. He's trying to tell us that if you really want Emunah, you've got to get rid of all these philosophical inquiries. You've got to leave them behind because they oppose each other. In the tree of life, there is Emunah. In the tree that's not life, which is opposite the tree of life, which is the tree of the Sichot HaRan, there is no Emunah. There's just chakirot. There's questions that go nowhere. Debates that go nowhere. Trying to figure things out with questions that sound sophisticated but aren't. Now, how do we recognize, for example, if we're spiritually sabotaged? I mean, it's nice to read these words, but what does it really mean? I think what it really means is that, and you can maybe catch yourself to do this, or perhaps it's easier if you see somebody else doing it. But just understand when you see somebody else doing it, and you say, oh, and you catch it. You can only see that person doing it because you yourself do it. Understand that. Baal Shem Tov taught that very, very strongly. And that's the foundational premise within all of Chassidut. If we see a sin in somebody else, it's only because we have that sin in ourselves. But sometimes it's easier to see it in the other person. Not that you're supposed to, but sometimes you do see it in the other person. Not to judge the person, but to say, oh, I just saw it in another person. That person is my mirror. That means it's in me. Oh, I'm so ashamed. That should be how we should be approaching it. But sometimes it's easier to see in the other person. See what? Sometimes you run into people and they ask questions, but you know from the question that they're not really interested in the answer because you can provide them with an answer. And then what do? Ask another question right away, as if that answer was meaningless. But really, you actually provided them with the precise answer, but they really didn't want the answer. All they wanted to do was what? Debate. What they wanted to do was be a little sarcastic. What they wanted to do was they had an axe to grind. That's what's inside of their heart. And that's why they're doing that. So in a sense, people that are never satisfied with any kind of answer, because they always got a quick one to pull out of their pocket, just to try to shoot you down, to try to humiliate you, to try to show you that you don't know anything. So that kind of bitterness that you can see in people, if we do see it, be aware. It's in our own heart. That's why we saw it. So that's a lot serious self-reflection. But at least it helps us to understand what it means to be spiritually sabotaged. That's that chakirot. Questions, pseudo-questions, but you don't really want the truth. Simply put, questions where people really are not interested in the truth. They're just interested in questions for the sake of questions. Arrogance. They want to sound intelligent. They're not interested in the heart. That's number one. Number two, kind of pseudo-questions, is what are called soul damage. These are questions that emerge from a damaged soul. What damages our soul? Sins. Averot damages our soul. Rebbe Nachman says it this way, Vida, know the following, Ki yesh averot, there are sins, transgressions, shehem machnisim kefirot be'adam. There are certain kinds of sins that actually put heresy into the heart of man. And that's a whole separate topic in and of itself. And I can't spend time going over every single one of these. What is these kind of sins? What are not these kind of sins? This is an overarching, umbrella kind of a shiur, just to help us to appreciate how and why Rebbe Nachman is so much against this. But be aware that when we sin in some very profound ways, we can actually stick heretical ideas into our own hearts and into our own soul. And as a result, we end up with a damaged soul. And that damaged soul is going to now start asking questions. But they're coming from a source that's been hurt. And we're all walking around with damaged souls. We're all walking around with hypersensitive souls in some cases. In other cases, very calloused. Just the opposite. Very callous souls. Either way, at both extremes, we have damaged souls. And what Rebbe Nachman is teaching us here is that one thing that damages souls is heretical ideas. And when we have heretical ideas in our heads and in our soul, we're not coming from a proper place of asking the right kind of questions. We're asking questions from a completely off-base perspective. Okay, number 3. This is something that we cannot control. The other ones we can control. This one we can't. This one we're born with. Sometimes we have a soul that's rooted in the upper worlds in a weak place. And you might say, well, that's not fair. Well, everything is fair because that's the way Hashem is. But such people, we may have come down from a higher source at conception when our mother and father sired us, when they conceived us. Maybe they didn't conceive us in, the most holy environment possible with the most holy thoughts possible. As a result, it could be that the soul that they brought down into the body, remember there's three beings that create, the human, the mother, the father, and Hashem. Hashem provides the soul, the mother and father provide the body. So if the mother and father's thoughts are not really super holy and pure at the time of conception, at the time of being yichud and having, intimate relations, then it could be that the soul being drawn down into that body is not such a great soul. As a result, it's entering the world already messed up. And as a result of that, that person is going to have a completely different pathway that he or she has to go through in life. That's their tikkun. They have to do that. It's not a question of fair or not fair. It's who their soul was and has been for previous gilulim. So it's ultimately fair, but they have to fix it. So we cannot compare and say, oh, well, I came into the world through this terrible situation. That's the way it has to be for you, if that's the case. Let's see what Rebbe Nachman says. V'yesh shaba'im alehem machshavot al emunah machmat shelo noladu b'kedusha karui. Some people have all these kinds of questions about emunah. They never can quite kind of get it straight in their heads because it could be that they were not born into a situation of kedusha. They didn't come into the world through kedusha. Could be the father, had relations with his wife, and it was not a very loving event. Could have been a very vulgar event. Who knows what the case may be? You don't know. Nobody knows. Your parents don't tell you. But that's what could be. And as a result, somebody could be all their life struggling with issues of emunah. Not know why. Joe Blow over there, he doesn't have any problem. He guy has great, tremendous emunah all the time. Why come I can't be like that? Could be. Maybe this is why. I don't know. Maybe. So on top of that problem, then the person starts sinning because he's of a lower soul. V'yesh shemosifu al zeh, and then they add upon that masahem haraim, all these bad deeds, sins in other words, shasu b'atzman, that they do themselves. Kiyesh averot shehem mazikim upogamin et emunah. Like we said before, there are sins that damage and cause blemishes to the soul. So sometimes it's like double duty. The person comes down from a very impure place. It's part of Hashem's, destiny and all that stuff, and Hashem is in charge of it, and he's totally aware of what's going on, and it's for this soul's good, and so on and so on. But it's a damaged soul from the get-go. And then on top of that, because it's so damaged, the person gets involved maybe in all kinds of more sins. Maybe they grew up in a place that just, wasn't really good, in a bad environment, and bad choices, and, it was very difficult to break out of that. So it's a tough situation. Okay. They can also have questions about emunah and not know where they're coming from. So they have a tikkun to do. They have a pathway they have to go through. They have to purify that. They got to recognize it and start to work on resolving it. That's number 3. Number 4. Number 4 we're calling pseudo-logic. I think also Rebbe Nachman calls it foolishness. So we're going to call both of those like pseudo-questions or pseudo-logic, and foolishness is kind of the same thing. Before we read this one, it's a bit of a long piece here. What exactly is it? It's really, another way to look at it is it's a sleight of hand. It's an argument or question that seems like it's a real valid argument, but there's a built-in assumption which traps the person into a wrong conclusion without the person thinking about it deeply. So it's like a magic trick that it fools the person. It's trickery. That's why it's called pseudo-logic. It's not really logical, not really. And the law, all kinds of philosophical questions out there that people raise to try to poo-poo and to try to belittle spiritual people and spirituality and Torah with these, sophisticated pseudo-logical questions. Well, I don't want to get into them all because it's just really a waste of time. But Rebbe Nachman here is going to give us an example of what it means. And then you can apply it in your own life. The point is, how do you get out of that trap? You have to realize that it is a pseudo-logic. It's not real. And you got to think deeply about what you're being presented with and ask yourself the question, are there false assumptions built into this question? Okay, let's see what Rebbe Nachman says. Ube'emet hakushiot v'hakirot shel hamon ha'am. In truth, the questions and the philosophical inquiries of most people, heim shtutim gidolim, they're like really great foolishness. Ve'enam kushot kalal, they're not really questions at all. Rak machamat she'en lo dat, rather because the person doesn't have a developed mind. We're just going to use dot here in the sense of a general term, not necessarily, it is related to the sphera or the quasi-sphera of dot, but just think about it in terms of very, very practical. Somebody who doesn't have a very well-developed mind, his intellect is weak. Need velo lakusha. It seems to him that, that's really a deep question. Okay? Because the person themselves has not developed their own mind. So it's a trick. It's not really at all. Kamal Mashal. He's going to give now a story to illustrate what he's talking about. Shisholim et hatino. People asked, they bring a little child, maybe the child's 8 years old, 5 years old, bring the child to the table. I got a question for you. Okay, the child's all excited, he's going to get a question. Say, here's the question. There's a setup, first of all. And here's the setup. Shnizbar ha-zuchuchit shel ha-chalon. So this window pane, glass in the window got broke. V'lakachu ha-zuchuchit ha-sheni she'etzlo. And they took another window pane that was next to it, ukavuha kan, and they set it in place where the broken one, they took out the broken one and put this new piece of window there. Vimkein yifrach hatzibor derech hachalal hazeh shel zuchukit hasheni. The question is, if we just did that, then what's going to be? That we didn't solve anything because the bird's just going to fly right straight through that space of the second piece of glass. Like what? Now, if you're confused by the setup, then imagine how the kid is confused by it. And Rebbe Nachman is dafka presenting a very confusing case that's unclear. You have a window that the window glass got broken. Then there's this other piece of glass next to it that they put in its place to fix the broken window. And the question asked to the kid is, well, what good do we do? Because now we got this hole and the bird's just going to fly through. Oh, so the kid goes, wow, yeah. I didn't think of that. So what is the kid going to answer? Doesn't know what to say. Let's go on. When you ask the kid this, shekololin lo hateirutz im akushya biyachad, that the question and the answer are all kind of tied together in one package. Azai nidbelo lekusha gadol. It seems to the kid that whoa, what a profound, deep question. I don't know. Well, I don't know. What are you going to do? I don't know. You just broke one window and now you got another hole, and the kid doesn't know how to answer it. Ve'eno yodea ma lashiv kalal. He doesn't know what to give an answer at all. Ube'emet hakol shtut. The whole thing is stupid. The whole thing is foolish. What's really going on is to understand what the questioner didn't say. He didn't say where the other piece of glass came from, did he? He just said the other piece of glass just was etzlo, was just next to it, it was nearby. Pretty vague term, etzlo. So to the child is thinking to himself, maybe what happened was there was two window panes in a double window, and one of the window, the glass got smashed, and they just took the other one, which was next to it, and moved it over. So what did he accomplish? Nothing. Because therefore the bird is going to go through the empty space. But is that what the questioner said? No. The questioner was specifically vague and didn't say that. The questioner just said, well, a window pane broke, and they took a second piece of glass that was etzlo and put it in its place. The thing is that the other piece of glass actually was just lying on the ground, next to it on the ground, not up in the window. It wasn't a double window pane with two windows. It was just a single window pane. And in fact, the person did fix the window. And then he says, well, what's going to happen by the space left? By the window. What space? There is no space. But the kid thinks that there's a space that the bird's going to fly through because in his mind, he pictured reality totally differently. So in the question is the answer. What's the answer? Etzlo, the true meaning of etzlo, next to it. Where was the piece of glass? The assumption that the sleight of hand, that the pseudo-logic was presenting to the kid, doesn't have a lot of das, that he's trying to trick the kid into thinking that it was just already in the window and it was a two window pane window. But that's not the case at all. He fooled the kid. That's what Rebbe Nachman is trying to teach us, is a pseudo question. It's a setup designed to trick us if we don't engage our brains and think clearly about what's happening. There was an assumption in that setup, and the assumption was wrong. But he didn't explain it to the kid that he built into it that there was an assumption that was wrong. He didn't say that. It was foolishness. But the kid was not sort of aware enough to see through it. Kamochem mamash b'nei adam shenichanas belibam kushot shel shtut ka'elu. Like he says, everybody does this. Just like this, all people, they allow these questions to get into their heart. They're not really questions at all. They're just foolishness. Shebemet zot akusha hu terut. Because in truth, the question is really the answer. You just have to pay attention to the question carefully and see inside that question is the answer itself. There's something fouled up about the question. So if you're presented with this great theological, philosophical dilemma, like, can Hashem create, he's all powerful, so can he create a rock that he can't move and all this kind of nonsense? This is an example of this, pseudo-logic. You need to think about that. What's the built-in assumption here? And you find out what the built-in assumption is and the whole thing collapses. That's what he means by that the answer is built into the question, it's all one. Machmat chesron havanato, because of a lack of understanding, nidmelo shu kusha gadol. The person thinks that it's this great, wow, what a mind-blowing question. I used to teach in university many years ago, and there was a philosophy teacher there at the time. I taught biology and chemistry classes, of course, and there was a philosophy teacher. He taught Greek philosophy. And I would ask the kids that took his class, and they were not kids, they were college students. They said, oh, he's such a great professor. Wow, his class is amazing. So I said, so like what? Tell me about it. And you know what they would say? Oh, I don't know. I can't. It's like, oh, but it was like so good. So it's so amazing. It kind of blew your mind, but you have no ability to give it over. That should have kind of clued you in right there that this idea of pseudo-logic probably has something to do with it. Number 5, mental confusion. What is mental confusion? Rebbe Nachman doesn't really explain it, what it is, but let's at least read what he says. Al kein tzrich adam l'salek midato. A person's got to remove from his das, from his mind, v'livroch mi kushot, and get rid of these questions, v'chakirot, and these philosophical inquiries, ushtutim, and all this foolishness, ubilbulim, that's the word here, bilbulim, mental confusions. Just strengthen yourself in Emunah. That's it. So what are mental confusion? If we go back and think for a second about pseudo-logic, what have we really learned? When we were talking about that window pane and the glass and all these fake questions that are not really questions at all, the mind is actually working. The mind, for example, of the child or of you is actually working. It's thinking. It's trying to figure it out, but it's getting trapped in this sleight of hand. It's getting trapped inside of a trap. But it is working. It's being diverted in the wrong direction. But the mind is functioning. It's just functioning a little bit crookedly. But here, mental confusion is the mind just kind of shuts down. It just stops working. The mind can get tired. It can get overwhelmed. It starts spinning out of control. Fog starts settling in. People all got mental fog. You can't think straight at all. So it's like the mind is offline, to sort of give it a modern day analogy. So whereas pseudo-logic plays on the mind's ability to function, but just crookedly and through deceit and deception, mental confusion works on the ability of the mind that's not functioning at all. But both of them can present real serious questions to people, but they're not really questions at all once you learn to develop proper das and Emunah. It'll heal your mind. So these are the 5 that I could find in this one piece of Rebbe Nachman, Sichot HaRan 32. Question is, what do we do to fix it? We've all fallen prey to these things for years. So what can we do to fix it? Understand that the healing is not intellectual. The fix cannot be intellectual. Why not? Because the problem isn't intellectual to begin with. The problem is a lack of Emunah. So trying to fix the problem with more intellect is just adding more gasoline, more fuel to an already raging fire. Rebbe Nachman tells us exactly how to fix the problem. V'alei busha v'lev nishbar. Through a sense of shame and a broken heart. Meaning one has to be honest about himself and really seek inner truth, humility. If somebody is like that and is willing to be that way to themselves, to really want inner truth, then they'll heal their soul. Their soul will get healed. You won't be suffering from all these 5 problems all the time so much. Alidei busha v'lev nishbar. Alidei zeh megaresh u'mishaber ha'chakirot v'machshot. That's how you're able to drive out all of that kefirah, all of that philosophical inquiry, questions that go nowhere, pseudo questions that confuse your mind. Through busha, being ashamed when you mess up, feeling a sense of shame. You have to think, when something happens to you, when somebody insults you or whatever, or a sin of yours is pointed out to you and you don't necessarily like the fact that it was pointed out, you should feel like real shame that Hashem just showed you something. But, we don't often feel that way, do we? But a broken heart will feel that way. A broken heart, and the only way you can have a broken heart is to go to Hashem and spend an hour and heat boded every single day. I don't know any other way it's going to happen. So this comes down to being real. But being real in your private life to Hashem. Says, Hashem, break my heart. Smash it. Take that hammer and smash it. I don't want a rock anymore. I want real flesh. I want something real. So you have to approach this from a heart, not from your intellect. The intellect is causing the problem. It's a misdirected intellect. It's a misfiring intellect. And that's creating all these problems. So now, in review, what is Rebbe Nachman telling us? He's simply explaining out on a very personal, on a very emotional, on a very psychological level, exactly what we learned last week, which is the seduction of the serpent. The serpent is going to try to constantly seduce us into having these pseudo-questions. It is a lifetime to try to purge them away from ourselves. But Rebbe Nachman does not leave us empty-handed. He says, yes, we're all taking the advice of the snake. Yes, face the problem. Don't bury your head in the sand. But on the other hand, realize the goal, which is true Emunah. See it burning in front of your eyes. Understand what the value of Emunah really is. And then, how do you fix the whole soul problem? Just be honest with Hashem. A broken heart, desiring inner truth. With that, we'll come back to the garden and we'll drive out the snake from the garden and we'll reunite with Hashem face to face. I want to put a little pitch here for our new Sefer. If you like this lesson and it speaks to you, you can find the Sefer now on Amazon, hardcover, Whispers from the Tzaddik's Heart. 48 chapters arranged in 9 different threads that goes through a lot of these kinds of topics about realizing paradox, truth, redemption, the heart, all the kinds of things that we all need to fix our soul. So check it out at Amazon.com. Until next time, have yourselves a great week.